Hi, Norma.
Okay, Rose, we are going to get started in just a minute. I'm about to remove our banner.
Good evening. Hi, I'm Rose McNeil and the chair of the Joshua Johnson Council for 2024-2025. We welcome you to Joshua Johnson's JJC Talks. And we're so thrilled that you took time out of your busy schedule to join us as we learn about Baltimore ceramic artist V Walton. For those of you who are new to Joshua Johnson Council, it is an affiliate group of the Baltimore Museum of Art and named after the 18th century African American portrait painter who lived and worked in Maryland. Joshua Johnson overcame so many obstacles in his career, and it is said that he paved the way for future African Americans to pursue careers in arts. And we're one of the oldest African American museum support groups in the United States, and we're currently celebrating our 40th year. JJC's mission is to forge meaningful connections between Baltimore's African American communities and the Baltimore Museum of Art by promoting and highlighting the achievements of African American artists. We invite you to join us at JJC. Our members share a passion for African American art, and the JJC membership offers a wide range of opportunities for art members just like you to actively participate in the museum's work within a network of friends and colleagues that are dedicated to art. Now, when you look at it, there are a lot of benefits for becoming a member of JJC. For one, you'll receive a monthly newsletter. You'll be invited to member-only events and get behind-the-scene tours of a lot of the different exhibits. You'll attend workshops designed especially for art lovers, educators, and collectors. And you'll be a supportive member of the Black arts community. So we also plan trips to meetups at galleries and museums in the region. Now, we have our business meetings on the second Thursday from September to June at 6 p.m. And we have our artist presentations that begin at 6:30. Join JJC and you will be a part of all of the activities that we have, and we welcome you. Our annual dues are $40 for individuals, $80 for dual membership, $15 for students, and BMA membership is separate. We would like for you to go online at artbma.org. That way you could join the Baltimore Museum of Art, and you can also join the support group, Joshua Johnson Council, okay? And also follow us on Facebook so you can keep up with some of the many things that we are doing and also keep up with what artists are doing in Baltimore and in the surrounding areas. Now we'll hear from our liaison, Meryl Hambleton, and she will introduce you to our wonderful artists that we are featuring tonight.
Thank you so much, Rose, for that wonderful introduction to JJC. Good evening, everyone. My name is Meryl Hambleton. I'm the Director of Public Engagement at the Baltimore Museum of Art, as well as the liaison to the Joshua Johnson Council. And I'm lucky enough in that capacity to support wonderful JJC events like this evening's talk with artist V Walton. And I'm so thrilled to introduce you to V's work. Walton is a ceramicist based in Baltimore, Maryland, and their recent work includes figurative mixed media sculptures and installations that embody Black feminist traditions and disability activism. Walton's work is interested in expressing the diversity of lived experiences within the Afro diaspora, and their work expounds on other metaphorical and literal connections between nature and the body. In a recent solo exhibition, which hopefully some of you were able to see, Terra, curated by the artist Derek Adams at Baltimore's Swan House Gallery, Walton extended this exploration of nature and the body. The show, according to Beamer Arts' C.M. Watts, created a visual experience that lures the viewer to inquiry by destabilizing the familiar with beautiful yet unsettling imagery. And V, we are so honored to hear from you tonight, and I will let you take it from here and tell us more about your wonderful practice. So without further ado.
Hello, thank you so much. Thank you to the Baltimore Museum of Art, to the Joshua Johnson Council for this invitation. I'm so grateful that each of you are tuning in and I get to share about my life and my practice. So my name is V Walton. I'm a multidisciplinary ceramic artist. I've been living and working in Baltimore for the last few years. My pronouns are variable, they, she, he is fine. And I'm currently an adjunct professor at MICA. So I'm excited to share with you this expansive body of work over the last few years, kind of getting into how my ceramic practice began, which began in Baltimore. So that's really a special component of this. And also how it's changed over time and it's morphed and it's grown. But being able to see the undertones and the overtones of my work and how some things have not changed. And so I'm grateful for this opportunity. So I would describe my love of sculpture in a few ways. One, clay is my first love when it comes to sculpture. It pulls me, it allows me to create things that were not there. It allows me to mold and shape and refine, to manifest. And so that is one of the central parts of my practice. But my second love is installation. And so I've been fortunate to, over the years, expound beyond just working in ceramic sculpture and now working with whatever materials call to me. So at this time, I'm really interested in the organic. I'm interested in environment. I've always been interested in the body, working with the body, not only in relationship to my own experience, but how I can also talk about a larger collective experience as well. And so I will always be a ceramic sculptor, but I've been excited to also transcend into these other realms as well. And so I'm excited to share that with you all. So this is a work for my graduate thesis show at Alfred University called Release. It's a mixed media installation using large tree roots, soil, hemp rope, porcelain slip. And this is in relationship to my other works of my thesis show. So I'm going to go back in time a little bit, go back to the beginning. So for me, I came to Baltimore around 2017 as someone who was an art educator and someone who has always been an artist. I had a previous degree in fashion design at the Fashion Institute of Technology. And so I was working with the body in a different way. I was working with textiles. I was also creating things, translating flat patterns into volume and to the round, right? And so I took this knowledge, and as I was finishing or pursuing getting my BFA, I went to Towson to do that. I encountered clay for the first time as an adult. I don't remember having access to working in ceramics up to this point. It was really a new world. It was really a moment where everything changed. And so I remember this prompt at Towson, which asked me if you could create a museum exhibition, what would you do? And I instantly thought of figurative sculpture in clay. And so that was a world shift for me. And so I changed my major to working in ceramic art at Towson. And there my journey began. So this is one of my first works that I was making at this time, which really kind of has like this thread that goes throughout my work to now. Before Towson, I was wrestling with a new development in my life. I had just been diagnosed with a rare progressive condition, which completely changed the trajectory of my life, the circumstances of which I navigated the world. I ended up needing medical care regularly. And so there was this huge departure from what I experienced previously till then. So I was searching for how to reflect this new reality through in a physical form. How could I communicate the internal externally? And so I started to fragment the figure in interesting ways. I started to use this tension between erosion through holes in the body, through irregularity in surface, to start to talk about pain, to start to talk about just the interpersonal dynamics of when you're navigating something that's difficult, but you're also at the crossroads of other identities and other experiences. So that's where I really start to reflect on my intersectionality as someone who is a lot of things, is Black, queer, and disabled, and starting to find a language to speak about that. So I'm kind of jumping to when I was at Alfred University pursuing my master's in ceramic art. And so I started to think about scale in a different way, to think about mixed media through sculpture, to communicate some of these themes, and also to think about advocacy. As someone who is Black, the Black experience is at the center of what I do. I don't, not only can I speak to it, but it moves me, and it impacts the people that I care about and the people that I know and love. And so I use that Black feminist theory and that language of experience to also then think about disability advocacy. Before even my own illness, I have a brother who has autism, who has autism, is autistic, and so my relationship, raising him, being with him over the course of my life, and seeing how the world interacts with him, not only as a Black child, but as someone with a disability, informed my relationship to how people actually interact with this. Like, how do people engage with difference? How do people engage with otherness? And so through this work, it's called By Stigma, What I Am and What I Am Not, I was thinking about the experience of being othered, almost from an external view, and how that stigma is usually put upon the individual, and it's not always something that is coming from within. It's coming from society, it's coming from barriers, it's coming from the way we speak about it, the way we interact with people. And so there's this pain that's visceral, but then there's also this invitation to think about the body, and think about your body, and think about your relationship to some of these really difficult things. So I started to ask really larger questions that were beyond just my life, that were just beyond what I had personally experienced. This is part of some of the figurative work that I made for my thesis show, my MFA thesis show. I believe that scale sends a message, and it also allows people to, I believe it allows people to interact with the work differently. We can often associate ourselves or associate others more easily through this vehicle. And so I made, over the last few years, through just like my training and my own expression and my practice, started building really large scale ceramic figures through slab and coil building. So through hollow forms and techniques. And so this was a challenge, and it was exciting, and it was many things. And as someone who does have physical limitations, I'm grateful for those who have helped me to move the work, transport the work, all of the other limitations of creating work like this. But I felt empowered, and I feel empowered to make work that delivers a statement, that looks you in the eye, that has a certain autonomy to it. So as I was thinking about issues of equity, issues of differences in autonomy between people and society, I was also thinking about making power symbols and symbols of resistance. And so this was a work that really resonated my feelings of strength, not only just coming from a source of resilience, but just inherent self-worth, inherent beauty, inherent stability. And so I enjoyed the tension of these works and making different pieces that reflected an experience that wasn't just mine. So going back to just talking about the diversity of the human experience, of diversity within different Black people's experience, I didn't want to just talk about my particular relationship to disability. And so I've been grateful to have friendships and relationships with people who we've been able to share and talk about these things more deeply. And so I wanted to kind of share on this expansive experience of being disabled and talk about this person who was an amputee and talk about stigma in this way, but also there's allowing the viewer to maybe interact with their own perception of disability. And so having the figure be in this pose of stillness, but there's this quiet strength, this resolve. There's not a presence of fear. And so I like to extend an invitation always to just see what comes up in people, what can we do to grow in our interactions with others, how can we see ourselves even if we don't have this particular experience. This was one of the works for me where I began to work with installation and sculpture that had nothing to do with anything ceramic. So this was really exciting for me, this not departure, but this entryway into the organic, me focusing on things that were environmental aspects, that were environmental in relationship also to disability advocacy. And I was really excited. I have a love for tree roots. I don't know if you can tell or not. But just bringing in these natural elements, but also the metaphors between what is natural and what is unnatural, and what are the biases and what are the things that we've been told about what's unnatural, and subverting that and changing that. And so for me, this was my way of really finding a language for the diversity of the human experience, disability as being natural, as being something that exists, not saying that it's not difficult, not saying that there aren't challenges, but also this is the thing that will always be and has always existed. And so how can we kind of change our perception about this? And so I love the greenery, the botanicals that are coming through, and the way that it's almost referencing this forest floor. But there is a bounty in this growth. And so I always want to have the light and the dark, not always to kind of show the balance of these experiences, that there's always something positive to be found. And so this is one of my favorite works where I was able to find a marriage that worked for me, to communicate many of these things. So here is where I was able to also start to build this this relationship between installation using ceramic objects, ceramic sculpture, and organic material. So here I have 3 vessels that are way abstracted bodily forms, and having them in this shifting landscape in a way. So it's called a collective struggle. And for me, I wanted to find a way to talk about autonomy, to talk about systems of oppression in a way that had nothing to do with the body, or it had nothing visually to do with the body. And so it was, not only is there this historical importance around the vessel when we're thinking about ceramic art and the canon of just ceramic art in general, but using it in an interesting way, in the mode of installation. So this was also the beginning of me starting to do these things and come up with this process. So as I've transitioned from my graduate work, I started to think about what was the next thing, what my work was going to communicate, what really was moving me. And I wanted to really think about environment in a way where the body, the figure, started to morph and started to become nature itself. And so for me, taking that dive and taking that leap was so exciting, because I feel like I had been on the edge of that for such a long time. And so it was also reflective of me and my priorities within my life. I had been fortunate enough to grow up in a household where I went hiking and I enjoyed being outdoors. And so I had this very pretty much like positive relationship with the environment in terms of interacting with the environment. And so I started to lean more so into a place of comfort and thinking about creating moments of stillness within my sculpture based upon my own explorations and my own positive moments of being out in nature. I started reflecting on my journeys of harvesting wild clay, for harvesting the soils that I use, for just the ritual that I ended up that I've cultivated over time of being in nature and finding that reverence for the unknown and finding that reverence for what's around us. So when it came to ceramic sculpture, it's been this really fun experience of how can I make this not look like ceramic? How can I kind of play with the tension of like, what is it? Um, or the fact that it's referencing something organic that already exists. And then there's just so many layers into where these materials are sourced, and the fact that I'm working with a clay body that has natural origins. And it's just been a really beautiful moment in my practice for me that I'm going to continue to explore. So this work is called Grounded. It's one of my most recent works from last year. And so for me, not only morphing the body into nature was a reflection of just how I see the world, but it's also an environmental call. It's a call to, I think, the Black experience of being in nature that isn't tied to labor, that isn't tied to pain, that isn't tied um, to so much of the stress of our history. And so finding those moments where I can speak about that and then speak about the light as well. But as I have been exploring environmental messages, also thinking about how timely this is to speak more potently about environment, just given everything that is happening in our world. So the following works are a part of a solo exhibition that I had at Swan House Gallery. The exhibition was called Terra, and it was curated by Derek Adams. And so I started to really enjoy exploring scale, making these really intimate pieces where people, while there was so much texture and information, but you really have to look and see. And then also making larger installations that are reflecting our greater environment and ecosystem. So I enjoy the balance of making small and large things. And for me, I really enjoy making these heads that feel like roots that extend down and connect and have multiple sides to them and change based on their perspective on and how you're looking at them. So this piece is called "What If I Told You Everything Was Connected?" But that's not. It's also I've been trying to think about the metaphors between the health of the land and the health of the body, the health of just our collective and what's going on around us. And so these messages are kind of hidden in all the work, and are exploring different moments. This is also where I have been enjoying experimenting with different surfaces. So as a ceramic artist, someone that is trained in this, there is not a push, but somewhat of an expectation to explore traditional surface. But for me, I've been really playing with the in-between of using ceramic solutions and glaze and terra sigillata and things of that nature that are more expected, but then also using cold finishes and soil and other things that are permanent and embedded in the sculpture itself, but speak more to the place of where I found these things, speak to the greater ecosystem. And so I've been enjoying this balance between what I've known and also just completely doing whatever I want, and creating these new surfaces for myself. So that has been really enjoyable for me. So I'm with these smaller pieces, I'm always thinking about into the context of what it's supposed to do or where it's coming from. And so I've been thinking about the pedestal in a different way, by sourcing on my explorations materials that really embody these environments. And so I've been spending a lot of time in local sites around Maryland, between Baltimore and DC, just thinking about these things, but then also sourcing some of these materials. And so whenever I'm making something, I'm not just thinking about it as an object. It's always an embodiment. I want it to have a life. I want to feel like it's living somewhere. There's an essence to it. And so this is the installation view of two of these root head sculptures. And so I enjoy seeing it in a place, in a snapshot of this this floor with soil and long these grasses. And so I am finding ways to create small moments of installation, even if that's not necessarily really completely what's happening there. The figure will always guide me. It's something that even though I'm exploring making installation using other materials and other influences, the figure is the thing that I tend to think of first. And I often use myself. I use myself as I can use myself as a way to talk about these things. So for me, this was one of those moments where I completely abandoned the traditional or expectation of surface, and I'm really thinking about uh, the shedding of ego, the shedding of kind of this idea that humans know best an environment can suffer, or environment is there um, to have its resources taken. And so for me, I'm thinking about the body as an extension of environment, of thinking about kind of letting go of some of um, the ways, or like the selfish thinking that I think about my own priorities, and how I can think more organically and sustainably, and think about like whatever happens to our environment is also happening to me. And so this idea of losing form, of losing shape, I was really interested in. And it's also that ambiguity of gender, as I'm thinking about queerness, as I'm thinking about how all these things work together, um, and that duality and that multiplicity when you're living at the intersection of many things. So I love this piece as a self-portrait, but also just like another snapshot into the way that I'm interacting with the world around me, or that I hope to. So here I have a singular sculpture that is in the back of this larger installation called The Land Remembers. And so I have this mix of ceramic sculptures which are made to look like the organic thing. So it's like this tension between what already exists and what inspired me in mimicking those forms and mimicking those shapes. And then also masking the ceramic nature of those sculptures by adding my various solutions and doing all the things. So it's a little bit of hide and seek. It's a little bit of the blending of all um, these natural materials in a really interesting way. So I really think about where I get my soil from, where I get my clay from, and I really wanted to talk about extraction, and how that's happening. And so I was at the site of a mass extraction as people were um, kind of like bulldozing this large area where they were going to end up making a development. And so I had grown up around that area for a large portion of my life. And I was just kind of wrestling with the fact that this natural landscape was changing, that there was so much loss, that you know, the trees and the animals and all those things like that, that there was, yeah, for the sake of industry and commerce. And so I made this piece called The Land Remembers, kind of as a way to capture that moment in time, that moment of stillness, of being on the land and remembering what was there before and what was happening. And many of these tree roots and other things were just discarded and left from that place. So it's, for me, advocacy is in everything that I do. And I'm also excited about talking about environment and talking about climate change and things of this nature, through organic forms, through sculpture, through the actual items of place. So from the last example to this one here, it's been interesting moving into other modes of installation that have nothing to do with the figure, that have everything to do with recreating a place that has its own identity, that has its own characteristics, that has its own life, that is using plant life and soil and is really based in texture. And so this installation was an interaction to the actual gallery itself, thinking about how I can think about the way that this room or this gallery space was before I got there, and thinking about how nature will always find a way. It tends to always grow back, creep in, grow over. It there's this like strength and defiance that nature has, and in that same breath, you know, either from our doing or just the cycles of nature, we see it go away and we see that it's ephemeral. And so I wanted to make this installation that captured those sentiments, and it's called Here Today, Gone Tomorrow. And I'm excited to continue to make installations like this, where not only I have actively sourced these materials as sustainably as I can, but I'm also just making these moments of reflection. I hope that as I've made this work, I'm able to also showcase the peace that I have also found being in nature, the reverence that I also have for nature and how it works together. And I think from a Black experience, speaking more about this, speaking about how this has always been indigenous to us. This is always this reverence and this love has always been there, and finding ways to connect to it are so important for all of us. So I'm looking forward to doing this and also making more large scale figurative sculpture. So I would love for all of you all to connect with me. Thank you so much. I wanted to share this work. My website is victoriawaltonstudio.com. And just thinking about a lot of these topics, I also, any chance to highlight other Black disabled advocates, definitely have an opportunity to do that. But I would love for you to check out my website and to join my newsletter and get updates for future things that I will be doing. But thank you so much for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you so much, V, for that beautiful presentation of your work. I am going to share some questions that have been added to the chat, and just want to reiterate that if folks in the audience have questions, please put them in the chat and I will share them. So the first is from Andrea, who asks, can you share some of the techniques used to build, I think they're specifically referring to the tread lightly piece. And I guess I'll just add a little bit to that question, which is, you mentioned, the idea of relationship between land and labor. And I was thinking about the physical labor of building and making this work, from dragging large trees and, having done a little bit of work in clay, just physically working on a small object is taxing. So I'm curious about that as well, and the firing process and all of those. So.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for the question. So all of the large sculpture that I have made, pretty much all the sculpture I make is through slab building. So that's using flat pieces of clay and manipulating them at the proper stage of stability, and stacking. I know that sounds, you're like, how does that happen? I will definitely hope to do a demo or something at some point. But this is a technique that I have become proficient over time. But it is difficult at that scale to make something with that technique. And so I've been grateful to have mentors and other people that do this work, that make large scale figures with those techniques. And so I've had a lot of great advice, a lot of assistance in that way. And it's interesting. I make difficult things. And there are a ton of challenges, not only in the construction of them, but the moving of the objects after. It sometimes there is just, I would say for me, it's a willpower. I just am driven to make work at this scale, but there's always a need for me to ask for help. I cannot do this solely alone. And relating to the larger pieces, it's all about facilities. So having kilns that are to that size, and waiting for opportunities where you can work at places like that. Yeah.
I like the idea of needing to ask for help in the creation of the work. Feels like resonates with the larger themes of, you mentioned the collective and that kind of interdependency. So that makes sense. I'm going to share a question from Antoinette, who asks, are the tree roots and greenery sourced from a specific or significant place? Are they sourced specifically for an exhibition and place based on the piece?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I have various sites that I have will go to. They are secret for a reason. But yes, it depends. When it comes to soil, when I've sourced certain things, I am able to reuse it for various installations. So I know where it's coming from. I know the locations that I'm pulling these things from. And then other times when I'm making an installation, I know what's missing. I know what's going on. But a lot of my practice is very intuitive. So often I'm outdoors and I don't necessarily know what I need, or that's not necessarily why I'm out there, and I will see it. I think it's just developed over time, me learning the language of landscape and kind of being able to pick up on where clay might be or what type of soil this might be, things of that nature. So that's just developed over time. Yeah.
And I have a follow-up to that also from Antoinette, which is related, I think, to what you were just saying about this intuitive process in the field. Do you create pieces the pieces before you consider an installation, or do you already know the story that you want to tell? Your work presents like visual journal entries that you've shared so beautifully.
Oh, thanks. I have two ways of working. Sometimes I know I have a project and I pull from the language of the materials that I use to create. But oftentimes I'll also just be in my studio and it is, I guess it's like a journal entry. I am making without necessarily always being conscious of how it's articulated. But I know the attributes of the season that I'm in. So right now, everything is organic leaning. So even when I'm in the studio, that's what will come about. That's what will happen. So I think that's kind of how I work at this time. Yeah.
George asks, what is the relevance of the context of exhibiting works in a non-museum/gallery space?
Every space has its benefits. I think for me, there's some parameters to where you exhibit work. Because I am referencing environment, I am interested in making work that maybe reflects more of the place. So maybe it will be through public art or through outdoor installation or through a place where that's not like the white cube that will allow me to bend rules in a specific way. But I want people to interact with the work regardless of where it's exhibited. So I think every opportunity is wonderful, and I don't really have a preference except for large scale public art. That might be my preference, but
That's exciting to imagine.
yeah.
A somewhat related question from Deborah about organic materials like roots and soil that aren't usually welcomed in museum spaces because of possible introduction of insects. How have you worked your way around that?
Yeah. So I treat all of my found wood, anything that is that I might directly source that is somewhat alive or might have some kind of organisms to it, I have to treat it. You want to be safe. You want to. It would be irresponsible of me not to. I think soil can be a little bit different in the sense of through the processing of it, you can kind of filter it in a sort of way.
I have a question thinking about the natural materials, looking at your work. It has so much physical presence, not only in terms of the scale, but also the smell of the soil, the warmth of the clay, the way that I imagine like the plant material moving. And I'm wondering about how much you're thinking about that physical encounter with the work and how that might intersect with your work with disability justice.
Yeah, I think about the interaction, how the viewer's interacting with the work all the time. I think that's why installation is so exciting and how I've kind of transitioned over time from, I would say, object making to kind of embodiment. Really thinking about something not being so static, but how can I create context around the piece too? That's been really important for me. So that's why I'm bringing in other materials that speak to the language of the work and also what I do, because I want people to not think about it as just a sculpture, but was like, what are, yeah, how, yeah, like how can people's perception be changed, or how am I introducing this in a new way? Yeah.
Antoinette asks about the kneeling piece, if you could share the dimensions of that work and what is at the center of the chest.
I believe that was my undergrad work. I believe it's somewhere between 24 inches in height by 20 depth, and it's probably like 14 in width. Yeah.
We have time for a few more questions if anybody has not put theirs in the chat and wants to share. And then V, we have a question about your list of 12 Black disabled activists and advocates. Is that information that can be found on your website?
So it's, if you were to look up this exact phrase, it will bring you to a website about disability advocacy. Because it can't be a live link, I wanted to at least have the keywords for people to search if they were interested in doing so.
I can try to share that link out with the group, with the JJC group afterward as well.
Okay, perfect.
Deborah asks, do you use any kind of armature as you build the coils for the life-size pieces?
I do not. So it's all freeform, self-supported. In the making of the work, it's all about building at the right stage, letting it set up before building more. There can be external supports, but no, I don't tend to have many or any internal supports or a traditional armature. So when you think about armatures, you're thinking about most likely solid building. And so slab and coil, you wouldn't need any of those things. But that's the fun. That's the enjoyable part about using those techniques, living on the edge.
I want to add another process question. You mentioned cold finishes, and I was curious what that means.
So non-ceramic finishes that don't utilize the process of being fired. So I've been exploring using dry clay, oxides, and other ceramic materials, but not through a firing process. Yeah, that's been the experimentation aspect of the work lately.
Also connected to that, I wanted to ask, you mentioned in the piece with against the sort of orange rust backdrop that you were experimenting with trying to mask the material that you were building from, or kind of making ceramic forms that looked like natural forms and then masking the ceramic. And I'm curious where that impulse came from.
I'm interested in the qualities of the real organic objects. I'm interested in the aesthetics of it. Also, just how they can feel unearthed or from the ground. And so I'm interested in mimicking that texture of if I had dug something up, if I had um, um, extracted it in that way. And so that masking is the enjoyable part of saying, like, does this look like the thing that I'm inspired by, or that I'm referencing? Like, does it have the life of that? Yeah.
Tavon asks, what is your most challenging piece?
Ever? The full figure, treading lightly. It's 5 feet by 5 feet, and about 350 pounds of clay, hollow built. It was an absolute feat to build. But such a triumph to make. Absolutely.
That piece looked like it had almost a bronze-like quality to the glaze. Was that intentional?
So it's not glaze, it's a cold finish that I've created. But I'm referencing um, bronze sculpture. I'm referencing like the monument. So I wanted to have that quality come through, but without that ceramic process. Yeah.
Antoinette asks, you mentioned irregularity in surface. Can you expand on that in terms of color, texture, or otherwise?
Sure. This piece here that's on the screen is a perfect illustration of irregularity in surface. So I'm using a few things. I'm using terra, which is a very refined liquid clay slip that has a high presence of iron oxide. So it has like this really rich brown rust color, and I used it, ad, adjusted its tone in two different ways. But then I also have unfired clay that I've meshed into the piece, and it's embedded onto the sculpture. So it can't, it's not coming off. And so that, in combination with some other cold finishes that I've done, which highlight the texture and have a slight sheen. And so you just have these different surface qualities throughout the work that are all different solutions, that are all different approaches to surface, but then um, highlight either skin or the way that clay or earth feels, or the way that this is kind of like a reference to mushrooms, that white on the sculpture. So I'm interested in how that texture is revealed or how it's highlighted through using different things.
V, thank you so much. Your work is gorgeous, and it's so fascinating to learn more about the process, which is just adds so much more to seeing the images. I'm wondering, seeing the photographs of your work makes me want to be near it and in its presence. And I'm wondering if you could share what's next, if you have any shows on the horizon or any opportunities to see your work in person, so that the group could experience it in person.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So I plan to have a large installation this summer in New York City. More information will come out in a bit, but you can follow me on my website, and hopefully take a glimpse at that. I will also be in a few other shows this spring, and hopefully a local show, Baltimore Clayworks, in the fall. Yes, and hopefully you get to experience the work soon.
Yes, please keep us posted on all of that, and we will follow as well. And I want to just share that Nadine says hello to you.
Hello.
Well, V, thank you again for your time and your generosity and for sharing your practice with us. It's been a pleasure to have you as part of the JJC Talks series. And if anybody would like to view any part of the talk, again, it will be posted for the long term on the BMA's YouTube and Facebook channels. And again, we invite anyone who's viewing who's not yet a JJC member to join us. We are doing all sorts of exciting events like this and much more, as Rose mentioned. So we look forward to seeing you all at our next talk. And thank you again, V. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks so much.